Welcome to round 7 of NASAT 2018. On the left, I have Maryland Black, and the team on the right is Pennsylvania White. Black and white here. Here we go, toss-up 1. A Llewellyn separator can be used during this technique to concentrate the flow of the analyte. It does not involve contact angles, but the inverse form of this technique can be used to measure surface energy of solids. A normalization factor used in this technique contains a term calculated by multiplying the number of carbon atoms in alkane by 100, and using a catharometer typically gives a less sensitive measurement than the flame ionization variety of this technique. Microsyringes are used to inject the liquid samples into the inlets of instruments used in this technique, and common carriers used in this technique include helium. For 10 points, name this analytic technique that involves elution of a vaporized compound.
Gas chromatography.
Yes.
Nice.
Answer the following about math and science in ancient Mesopotamia.
No.
The Babylonians had a number system with this base, which allowed them to do the calculations more easily because this number is divisible by many factors, including the first 6 integers.
I think like 60.
Okay,
Makes
60.
The Babylonian scientist Kidinu worked to develop the System B calendar, which was based on this unit of time. Hillel II used Kidinu's value for the length of this unit of time for the Hebrew calendar.
That's like
A month. Month.
Prompts?
It's like a lunar month.
Yes.
Nice.
Esagil-Kin-Apli's Diagnostic Handbook contained descriptions of several varieties of this disease, which it attributed to possession by spirits and prescribed spiritual treatments for. This condition was the subject of Hippocrates on the sacred disease.
Any idea?
Schizophrenia or something. It's not really disease.
Answer,
Schizophrenia.
epilepsy.
Oh,
20.
Oh, closely.
A novel by an author with this surname follows a voice in Odilo's head that is astounded by how the Holocaust is creating a new race out of ashes, because it experiences time backwards. In a novel by another author with this surname, the protagonist's paper on shipbuilding techniques is plagiarized in an Italian translation. And another character claims to have attempted suicide as a manipulative...
Yeah, Amos.
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
Despite being depicted with beards, these beings are sometimes regarded as female counterparts of the male Shedu. For 10 points each, name these 4-legged, winged, human-faced guardians frequently sculpted at the entrance to Assyrian palaces. The Lamassu have bodies of this animal. The killing of this animal was a central image of the Mithras cult.
Bull.
Another winged being in Mesopotamian myth was this wind demon who brought storms and drought from the southwest. Answer,
Enlil.
Pazuzu.
Oh, that thing.
Noel Fallows described 3 characteristics for assessing this activity in Iberia as pulchritude, equality, and transferability. Count Montgomery, captain of the Scots Guards, became notorious after participating in this activity in 1559. Maximilian I developed the incredibly heavy...
Like jousting?
What?
Jousting? Yeah, you said you killed everybody. Yeah.
This artist used colored light projections for the background of the insurrection. For 10 points each, name this African-American artist who depicts the violent history of American slavery and racism through a room-sized tableau of black paper silhouettes.
Wiley? Wiley?
Kara Walker. Domino donated 80 tons of sugar for Walker's A Subtlety, which is an enormous sculpture of this kind of mythical creature that interrogated Oedipus in front of the former Domino refinery in Brooklyn. Walker was influenced by this artist whose sculptural installations include Silver Clouds, which is made of helium-filled mylar balloons. He directed the films Empire and Chelsea Girls.
This is good, right?
No, you're right. It's good. It's good.
Andy Warhol.
Oh.
Oh, films. That makes sense.
Oh.
In a photograph taken in the north of this country, 3 women with their heads covered stand with their backs to the camera, overlooking a plain and mountains. A bearded astrologer smokes a cigarette and is flanked by a sign detailing his works in a photograph taken in this country. This modern-day country is where Dean Dayal worked as a court photographer. An exhausted woman is carried with the aid of a pole in a photograph taken in this country by...
China?
No. by a journalist working for Life magazine to document a mass migration. In a photograph taken in this country, a shirtless man reads his papers while sitting beside a 16-spoke spinning wheel in the left foreground. For 10 points, identify this country where both Henri Cartier-Bresson and Margaret Bourke-White photographed the last days of Gandhi.
India. So we're good.
Yeah.
This is the only living animal in the family Dermochelideidae, for 10 points each, named a sea turtle, which is unique for its lack of a bony shell.
Leatherback?
Yeah.
Leatherback?
Yes.
Nice.
Leatherback sea turtles are able to dive deeper than a kilometer. Biologically, they're able to do this due to having a large amount of this oxygen-binding protein found in muscle.
Myoglobin?
Okay. Sure.
Myoglobin?
Yeah.
Nice.
The belly of leatherback sea turtles is a lighter color than their shell, which gives it this kind of camouflage that is also seen in certain sharks.
Is the one
Counter
with
shooting?
the
Nice.
little-
Nice.
yeah.
Counter shooting?
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. Alright, 30 points.
Let's make this happen.
Toss up 5. An old neighborhood in this city is home to the Gutzloff Signal Tower, an Art Deco structure that provides weather info to passing ships. This city's Lujiazui district was the site of the intentional development of a new skyline, starting with a tower that consists of 2 large spheres connected by...
Shanghai.
Yes.
Give me that towel.
Highway signs describe this man as the fat boy with the happy laugh and a veteran, for 10 points each, named as barbecue proprietor with a pet gray monkey who runs an institution known as the Tower and tells a visiting family about the misfit.
Oh, like Red Sammy Butts.
Yeah.
Different
Red Sammy Butts.
Red Sammy appears in the short story A Good Man is Hard to Find by this author. She also wrote Everything That Rises Must Converge in the novel and the novel Wise Blood.
O'Connor.
A cashier named Sammy features in this short story where he is captivated when 3 girls in nothing but bathing suits enter his workplace. In this John Updike story, Sammy quits his job to defend the girls, and his stomach kind of fell as I felt how hard the world was going to be. 30. Pass it down. Toss up 6. The man who commissions this object asks, "Can you smooth out a seam like this?" and says that this object should be made from items that are no longer useful, as I now neither shave, sup, nor pray. This object, which is described using the Miltonian phrase "fiery dart," is struck by lightning and set on fire, but the flames are calmly blown out.
Ark of the Covenant?
No. By its owner. As this item is being manufactured, its owner declares, "I baptize thee not in the name of the Father, but in the name of the devil." A hickory pole is added to items from a curious leather bag to manufacture this object, which the blacksmith Perth forges after melting horseshoe nails and razors. This item is made with the true death temper, quenched not with water but with the blood of Tashtego, Dagu, and Queequeg. That point's wet weapon is commissioned by the captain of the Pequod and intended to kill Moby Dick.
Like a harpoon.
Prompt?
Ahab's harpoon?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Nice day.
Paul Cohen proved that both this statement and the axiom of choice are independent of the Zermelo-Fraenkel axioms for set theory. 9 points each. Name the statement that there is no infinite set larger than the natural numbers but smaller than the real numbers.
I hate this one.
Answer?
Conjecture.
The continuum hypothesis. This Hebrew letter followed by subscript 0 is used for the cardinality of the natural numbers.
Aleph. Give the Aleph.
The generalized continuum hypothesis is that for any infinite set A, there is no set whose cardinality is between the cardinality of A and the cardinality of this set derived from A.
Like this set? No, what's the complement? Complement.
Answer. The power set of A.
Okay, cool.
10 points.
How many?
10, yeah.
Teaches you that. Not mine.
I'll take myself out of the math lesson.
I think.
7. This artist, who willed many of his paintings to Georgia O'Keeffe, painted a masquerade mask on a red and black background with the numbers 1, 2, 3 in his painting Love, 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 and showed a stack of patterned beige-bordered cards in his spring. This artist depicted tendrils of smoke curling around each other in front of the silhouette of smokestacks in his Incense of a New Church. A painting by this artist that showed a geometric factory was named for a pastoral romance, Aucassin and Nicolette. This creator of poster portraits for his friends called himself a precisionist and was inspired by a poem to paint an abstraction of a fire truck going by.
What's this guy's name?
Time.
Demuth.
Sorry. The Rainy Streets of New York, which contains the initials WCW. For 10 points, name this artist of I Saw the Figure 5 in Gold. Yes.
Sorry. That's good husband.
This character gives Egion an additional day to pay 1,000 marks. For 10 points each, name this Duke of Ephesus who punishes Egion of Syracuse for entering his city.
No. Not a
Wait,
real
is this
guy.
fictional or is it?
Answer?
Fictional, right?
Yeah.
It's Solinus. Solinus is a character in the Shakespeare play which features two twin brothers named Antipholus.
Oh, yeah, comedy bears.
The Comedy of Errors features another set of two characters with this name who serve the Antipholuses.
Okay, wait, Antiphilus and, what's the other guy's name?
I don't know.
Answer?
No.
Dromio.
Yeah, it's Romeo.
Like Romeo.
Wait, except it's an I.
Yeah. Okay.
10. This constant is multiplied by the reduced Planck constant in a numerator inside of a square root to calculate Planck length. One form
The wrench factor?
One form of time dilation is calculated using a fraction in which this constant is multiplied by twice mass and divided by distance times c squared, a fraction equal to Schwarzschild radius divided by distance. This constant is multiplied by 8 pi divided by c squared in a fraction that is multiplied by the stress energy tensor in the Einstein field equations. In 1798, a torsion balance was used to collect data that would be used to approximate this constant in the Cavendish experiment. For 10 points, this constant approximately equal to 6.67 times 10 to the negative 11th Newton meters squared per kilogram squared.
Big G.
Yes.
Hey, did you know that the wrench factor is another constant?
Oh.
Was that Connor?
I thought you were doing.
Was that Connor or Michael?
That's Michael.
It's like the gravitational.
Okay.
Like looping above gravitational.
Thomas Edison described this invention as the 8th wonder of the world. For 10 points each, name the machine invented by Ottmar Mergenthaler that set complete lines of text in blocks called slugs. This invention sped up the typesetting process, allowing newspapers to get longer.
Like blocking. I don't know what it's called. It's a certain kind of print.
Better than
Answer?
print.
It's called the linotype machine.
Okay.
Mergenthaler based his company in this city. H.L. Mencken covered the Scopes monkey trial while working for a newspaper based in this city.
Well, is it Baltimore? Oh, actually, I think
Baltimore.
Yes.
Nice.
James Clephane, who was instrumental in the foundation of the Mergenthaler linotype company, served as an expert stenographer. His enthusiasm for rapid transcription drove the invention of these devices, the Scholes and Glidden type of which was the first machine that used the QWERTY keyboard layout.
Oh, what are these called?
Typewriter.
No. Oh, well, maybe. Go for it.
Answer.
Typewriter.
Indeed.
Yeah. Good.
So 20 points. Toss up 9. The Maronite friar Petrus de Monte Libano negotiated an alliance between this dynasty, Louis II of Hungary, and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. This dynasty ordered citizens to recite the Tabara, a ritual cursing of the Sahaba, Aisha, and the first 3 caliphs, until a Western neighbor forced them to end the practice in the Peace of Amasya. Robert Shirley helped organize Ghulam slave soldiers into the army of this dynasty, which was established when its Kizilbash Turkoman forces entered Tabriz. With the help of the English East...
Like the Safavids.
Yes.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, is Louis II I don't know how.
The obedience verse from this surah is used by Shiites to support the infallibility of the imamate. And once each, name this 4th surah of the Quran, whose controversial 34th verse has been criticized for inciting domestic violence.
So, I'm the women or Anisa.
Yes, many Muslim women wear this veil in a public setting, which covers the head and is supposed to uphold a standard of modesty. It is not mentioned in a sartorial context in the Quran, but is extensively elaborated in the Hadith. This woman, the eponymous subject of the 19th surah, gave birth to an important prophet under a date palm tree.
Like Miriam?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I mean, I
Yeah,
would take it there.
yeah.
But yeah.
All right. So 30. Yep. After the match, you'll get some more people. Toss up 10. A piano from Lokri shows this deity with her husband, where she was worshipped as a guardian of marriage. This deity is described as the mother of the Eumenides in an Orphic hymn that gives her the epithet Praxidike, or applier of justice. Pirithous' feet were coiled with snakes for his attempt to marry this goddess, who was often known by the name Kore, meaning the maiden.
Athena.
No. Ovid describes how this deity turned Aesculapius into an owl by throwing the water of the river Phlegeton on him. The nymph Cyane melted into water after this deity was tricked into wandering alone towards a blue narcissus. Having eaten pomegranate seeds, this deity was not able to return. Yeah.
Boy, stop bullshitting.
Your bonus. A surprising fact in this field of economics is that the supply curve for its namesake quantity is backward bending, meaning that proportionally less of it is provided at extremely low or extremely high prices. For 10 points each, name this field of economics in which, on the micro level, agents must choose between consumption and leisure.
Oh, I'm good about this one so fast.
Answer. Labor economics. These two researchers found that callback rates were higher for resumes with white-sounding names than for those with black-sounding names. In their paper, are Emily and Greg more employable than Lakeisha and Jamal?
Okay, it's like Levitt and someone else.
Right.
It's Marianne Bertrand and Sendil Mulainathan. Bertrand and Mulainathan's research involved sending resumes to Boston and this other Midwestern city. The School of Economics in the city included
Chicago.
George Stigler, who pioneered the use of search theory and labor economics.
Chicago.
The other economics guy is in Douglas.
That's
Right.
journalist.
10.
Right?
Yeah.
So the score is 175 to 90 at the half.
It's not that far, let's do this. No names. I'm doing what? 175 to 90. I'm doing that.
No, you guys have 3 minutes.
What?
I have to next.
Yeah, we have 175.
What?
No!
Alright, halftime is over now. Toss up 11. Black ribbons were tied to Hungarian fire trucks after this event. Avant-garde composer Karl-Heinz Stockhausen opined that this event was the greatest work of art imaginable for the whole cosmos. This event prompted the writing of Welcome to the Desert of the Real by Slavoj Žižek. On the 700 Club, Jerry Falwell blamed this event on divine retribution.
Haitian earthquake.
Nope.
Oh,
For paganists and feminists that helped this happen. In a controversial poem about this event, Amiri Baraka asked, who told 4,000 Israeli workers to stay home that day? This event prompted the passage of the Patriot Act and motivated the Bush administration to declare a global war on terrorism for 10 points in this coordinated set of terrorist attacks, one of which destroyed the Twin Towers.
No, come on!
9/11.
Yes.
Can you not?
Rocks that are part of these bodies is scrape away at bedrock in a process called abrasion. For 10 points each, name this source of erosion.
Mass wasting.
Like, rubber?
Mass wasting.
Mass
wasting.
Glaciers.
What?
This method of glacial erosion is when glacier's ice is frozen into the rock beneath it. Pieces of that rock are broken off via thawing and refreezing.
What is this called?
Ablation?
Could be.
That sounds like it.
Ablation.
Plucking. This theory posits that glaciers are the limiting force of the height of mountains.
Never heard of this.
I hate this set so much.
Answer.
No answer.
It's the glacial buzzsaw hypothesis.
Nice.
0 points.
Glacial buzzsaw. I'm gonna look that up.
Yes, it is.
It sounds interesting. It's probably not.
Toss up 12. The novel Against the Grain describes the vague and delicious confidences of this poet and discusses his revitalization of fixed forms in his collection Wisdom. This author's collection, The Beautiful Song, was based on poems which he sent to his lover, Mathilde Motet. A museum near Lille is dedicated to a historically significant broadcast of one of this man's poems, which begins with the long sobs of autumn by...
Verlaine.
Yes.
Nice.
This city was made an international zone to be jointly governed by Spain, France, and the UK in 1923, an arrangement that lasted until 1956. For 10 points each, name the city that was ceded along with Bombay to Britain as part of Catherine of Braganza's dowry on her marriage to Charles II. The English withdrew from this city after it was captured by the Alawite dynasty in 1684.
It is in Morocco. Is it so, Rabat or Casablanca? Casablanca?
Tangier. The territory separated from Tangier by its namesake strait was captured by George Rooke during the War of Spanish Succession. As one of the pillars of Hercules, this town's rock is represented on the coat of arms of Spain.
Gibraltar.
This channel port fell under English rule after the Battle of Crécy and became a center for the wool trade. Francis, Duke of Guise, finally evicted the English from the mainland by taking this city in 1558.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good.
720.
Yeah. The RBCL gene that codes for this enzyme's large subunit is a common DNA barcode. In the Farquhar model, the maximum rate of this enzyme's activity is described by a parameter called Vcmax. This enzyme is activated in part by carbamylation of a lysine residue in its active site, which is stabilized by a magnesium ion. When this enzyme binds to an alternate substrate, it produces 2-phosphoglycolate in addition to its usual product of 3-phosphoglycerate. This enzyme, which is found...
Disco?
Yes. The title character of this picaresque novel is given his moniker by a hermit because he doesn't even know his own name. Each name is novel partly inspired by the life of its author Hans Jakob Christoffel von Grimmelhausen's experience in the 30 Years' War. Its protagonist's full name is an anagram of von Grimmelhausen's full name.
No, this is the Torms thing. It's not
Answer.
Torms.
Simplicius Simplicissimus. Grimmelhausen's Simplicissimus inspired this other German's portrayal of the 30 Years' War. In his play Mother Courage and Her Children, his playwright described alienation effects in Chinese theater in an essay.
Right.
Yeah. Swedish soldiers get one of these animals to lick Simplicissimus's feet to reveal where he has hidden his treasure. One of these animals, named Jolly, is able to spell in the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Horse song. Sure, the horse. Almost a horse.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Answer.
Horse.
Goats. 10.
Okay.
None of the above.
It's an option.
I guess you should have read out that.
This thinker wrote a book examining the Port Royal Grammar, which he still insists is a landmark work of intellectual history. This man further developed a theory named for a concept of heads projecting intermediate constituents, and later developed a theory based on the relation attaching pronouns to their reference and a more abstract commanding relationship between words. Those theories by this man, who extended the ideas of Zelig-Harris, are called X-bar and government and binding theory, respectively. This man used the sentence colorless green. After visiting this feature, Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote a story that gives this formation its alternate name. The points each named this rock formation in the Franconia Notch, nicknamed for its resemblance to a human face. Despite collapsing in 2003,
Old man of the mountain.
it remains the state emblem and a prominent symbol of New Hampshire.
Old man of the mountain.
Okay. Defer to Ed.
Old man of the mountain.
Grandfather Mountain in this state is named for its resemblance to a reclining man. It is one of the Blue Ridge Mountains in the westernmost part of this state, whose easternmost region is the Outer Banks Barrier Islands.
Wait, North Carolina.
North Carolina?
Yeah. This land formation on the Canadian side of Lake Superior is named for its resemblance to the legendary Ojibwe figure Nanabojo. It shares its name with the Trap Rock Mountain north of New Haven, Connecticut.
It's not Sleeping Bear Dunes. That's America.
Yes.
Answer.
Sleeping Bear Dunes.
What?
Sleeping Bear Dunes.
Sleeping Giant.
Close.
20.
Sorry.
15.
Oh, that's painful.
This essay expresses a worry that conformity can impose collective mediocrity and compares the pagan self-assertion of Pericles favorably to the Christian self-denial of Calvinists. This book claims that discussion of true, partly true, and false beliefs alike contributes to the common good. Although written 70 years after the Federalist Papers, this treatise popularized the phrase tyranny of the majority. It lists freedom of thought and emotion, freedom of taste, and freedom to unite freely as the three basic freedoms, and it ends by stating three causes for objection to governmental governmental interference. The claim that power may only be exercised over individuals to prevent harm to others appears in 9 points. What's essay about freedom by John Stuart Mill?
On liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
This critic wrote that a true poet must have the power of making words express what he feels, a stance that led him to criticize the grand style of John Milton. Naponteach, a famous English critic who put forth Jane Austen and Henry James as representatives of morally serious literature in the great tradition. He was known for his strenuous dogmatism as the longtime principal editor of the journal Scrutiny.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Answer. F.R. Leavis. Leavis's formalist emphasis on the words on the page is often compared with this school of American criticism, whose name was coined in a book by John Crow Ransom. It emphasized self-contained, close reading of poetry.
Just new criticism.
Yeah.
New criticism?
Other major influences on the new critics included this man, who included tradition and the individual talent, and Hamlet and his problems in The Sacred Wood. Leavis particularly admired this man's poem, The Wasteland.
Yeah, Hamlet's problems. Yeah, no,
Elliot?
20.
but yeah, Hamlet's problems is a
Yeah.
thing that I
Yeah,
should.
definitely, yeah.
Definitely not.
A piece in this genre by this composer has 7 movements and opens with a fugue whose subject begins G sharp, B sharp, C-sharp, A. The extensive third movement of another of these pieces by this composer alternates between adagio chordal passages in F Lydian and D major sections marked "Feeling New Strength." The final movement of one of these compositions was inscribed with the question "Muss es sein?", which is answered "Es muss sein." An ensemble led by Ignaz Schuppanzig premiered many of the late examples of these pieces. The cool reception to the 13th of these compositions caused the composer to write a lighter finale to replace the grossa fuga. For 10 points, name these pieces for two violins, viola, and cello by...
Handel's String Quartet.
Nope. By the composer of the Pastoral Symphony.
Oh my god.
Haydn String Quartet?
No, these are Beethoven. Toss-up 17. A man whose name references this country may or may not know that Karl may or may not have slept with his daughter or wife in a Robert Coover story. A person from this non-Dutch country swaggers into a saloon and assaults a gambler for not...
Sweden.
Yes.
Yeah.
This book argues that the refusal of slaves to work during the American Civil War amounted to a general strike and it was a major contributor to the Confederacy's loss. I want to teach in this book that applied Marxist analysis to the years following the Civil War. It argued that elite planners turned the white working class against black freedmen through the psychological wages of whiteness.
The warmth of the sun. The warmth of the sun.
Black Reconstruction in America. This thinker rebutted the Dunning School in his Black Reconstruction in America. He opposed Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise and wrote The Souls of Black Folk. Yeah. In 1910, Du Bois became the first editor of this official magazine of the NAACP. Jesse Redmond Fawcett promoted the Harlem Renaissance as a literary editor for this magazine.
Fire?
No, it's
It's
Something else?
Answer? The Crisis.
Wait, what's fire? Is fire's like Harlem Renaissance, right?
Toss-up 18. The aubergine was used as an auspicious symbol for participants in this system because of its resemblance to a man wearing a guan cap. The Northcote Trevelyan report sought to introduce an analog of this system in Britain. At points, products of this system were categorized by 9 ranks. Zhong Kui smashed his head against a door.
Is it like the civil service exam?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know the two Chinese people.
This pianist gave the first public performances of a Beethoven piano sonata cycle from memory. But upon each, named this conservative French romantic composer of the opera Samson et Dalila.
This sounds conservative.
Answer?
Try it.
Saint-Saëns used this wooden pitched percussion instrument to represent skeletons dancing in his Danse Macabre. He used these instruments to parody his Danse Macabre in the Fossils movement of the Carnival of the Animals. What? Yes. In Danse Macabre, Saint-Saëns has the violin use this technique by tuning the E string to E flat.
It's like intentionally playing the wrong note.
Yeah, maybe it's just like,
Yeah, intentionally playing the wrong note.
No, Scordatura.
Okay.
oh, there's just like a name for the thing. Okay,
For potentially playing the wrong note.
no, that's not the right. That
It's,
was
it's
not
tuning the
right.
string
It's just-
down.
Yeah,
It's just the name for
Not-
the thing that it's
yeah.
right. It's not a description.
Toss-up 19. The so-called halfway Morin's surface was created to give a constructive proof of an unexpected property of this other surface, originally proven by Stephen Smale. The projective...
Sphere.
Yes.
What?
Like Smale's thing is where you can like turn it inside out without making any cusps.
Oh.
In a philosophical text, this function is defined as either x plus y if x and y are less than 57, or 5 otherwise. For 10 points each, name this function that a philosopher used in an example of another philosopher's rule-following paradox. In that example, this function is confused with addition when someone is asked to add 68 to 57.
Multiplication.
Sure.
Answer.
Philosophic calculus?
It's quus. This philosopher used the quus function in an example of the rule-following paradox in his reading of Philosophical Investigations. This American philosopher introduced the term rigid designator in his book Naming and Necessity.
Is it quine?
No, I don't think it's quine. I mean, it could be. I don't know.
Let's just go quine.
Kripke. Philosophical Investigations is by this Austrian philosopher. His Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus ends with the declaration that whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Yes.
I think you wrote that.
Last toss-up. Zioni Zebit argued that the word Selah in this book's second chapter actually means baculum, and thus that the traditional translation following the Septuagint is incorrect. The E source is difficult to distinguish from the J source outside this book. The fact that various key words and phrase lengths in this book's first chapter are organized in multiples of 7 suggests that it was an effort by the P source to establish Sabbath law as intrinsic.
Genesis?
Yeah.
Nice. Good ones.
7 days of creation in the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Your bonus. In quantum mechanics, these polynomials are typically classified by 2 parameters, denoted script L and M, for 10 points each. In this class of polynomials, they are key to the solution of Schrodinger's equation in spherical coordinates, since when multiplied by e to the im5, they form the spherical harmonics.
What do we want there? Answers to Schrodinger's equation. What are they
Euler?
called?
I don't know.
Answer.
Euler.
No. It's the associated Legendre polynomials. The related Hermite polynomials play a key role in quantum mechanics since they appear in the eigenstates of this system. This system is characterized by a potential V that is proportional to x squared.
What?
Incarnation?
Get it over. Good.
No.
Quantum harmonic oscillator.
Oh.
Solving the particle in a box system with endpoints at x equals 0 and x equals a requires no polynomials at all. Instead, all solutions are proportional to this simple trigonometric function of n pi x over a for some n, since this trigonometric function has its roots at 0, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and so on.
Yes.
Wait. What is it?
Yes, the sign.
Answer?
Sign.
Mhm.
Yeah, sign.
I was like, it's
We take
fine,
it
right?
as much.
That is the end of the game. The score is
You're taking-
345
We
to.
have to stay here, right, or we don't?
No, we're.
There's a timer.
Oh, yeah.
I'll check on that in 1 second.
Well, no, that's not possible.
Right.
Exactly.
He went 1-7.
It's not.
The score was 345 to 115.